Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. I walked in on my wife half on top of our neighbor's kid. I'm Daniel, and this is where everything cracked open. 36 with no idea what I was looking at. That image hit harder than any punch I have ever taken. Megan's hand rested on his chest and he did not move. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. The game played on the screen and filled the room with fake excitement. I finally heard my own voice and it sounded wrong. I asked what was going on and tried to laugh. The laugh came out thin and high and hung there. Nothing weird, just the game on. Megan brushed hair from her face and looked past me like I blocked the view. She told me Tyler had dropped by to watch the playoffs. Tyler finally muttered that he would move if I wanted the couch. I said I was fine and stayed standing like an idiot. In my head, I filed it as awkward but harmless. He was basically family in my mind, always around for games or snacks. That is how I sold it to myself as I kicked off my shoes. I told my brain to stop being dramatic and jealous. Looking back, that was the moment I chose comfort over truth. I sat in the armchair and tried to focus on the score. Megan shifted back next to him, not touching but close enough to bother me. Her knee kept bumping his leg when she laughed at something on the screen. He never flinched or apologized or gave me the usual partner look. It felt like I had walked into a party I was not invited to. Eventually, I asked what quarter it was just to say something. Megan answered before he could open his mouth. "Third quarter, almost done now," she said. Tyler glanced at her first, then at me, checking which one of us he should mirror. I caught that little flick of his eyes and my chest started to heat. I asked if anyone wanted drinks and no one answered at first. Megan finally told me they already had some earlier. Her tone made it sound like I had missed a memo. I felt stupid for trying to play host in my own house. That is how small I had let myself become without even seeing it. Here is the part I keep circling when I replay that night. A normal husband blows up right there and demands answers. I know that is what people will say as they read this. Instead, I told them to enjoy the rest of the game and forced a smile. I walked down the hall with my heart trying to crawl out of my throat. I ducked into the kitchen and gripped the counter until my fingers hurt. For a second, I thought I might be sick right there. I checked my reflection in the dark window and I looked like a stranger. My jaw felt locked and my eyes were wide like a stunned driver. I told myself I was overreacting and that married people sit weird sometimes. When I walked back and they had shifted farther apart on the couch. Megan shot me this quick look like she wanted to see which version of me came back. I could feel the split inside me, calm husband or angry husband. I chose calm because I was scared of the answer to angry. That choice still gnaws at me when I try to sleep. We watched the last minutes of the game in this stiff silence. Megan made dumb comments about the score like nothing strange had happened. Tyler laughed and threw in a joke about my team like he always did. I laughed too because not laughing would mean starting a fight. My cheeks burned while I did it and my hands would not stay still. When the game ended, Tyler stood up and stretched like it was any normal night. He thanked Megan for the invite and for the snacks. He did not even look at me until he reached the door. Then he gave me this quick, almost guilty grin and a nod. That tiny flash of something honest rattled me more than the whole hour before. The door closed and I listened to his footsteps fade down the walk. Megan started gathering empty bottles with sharp movements like she was mad at gravity. I asked if everything was okay and the question sounded pathetic even to me. She said we were fine and that I was reading way too much into nothing. I nodded along while my gut screamed that this was not nothing at all. That night I lay next to her and felt miles away. She fell asleep fast, or at least pretended to, back turned to me. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the way she had been sitting with him. Every version of the scene got a little worse each time in my head. I did not know yet that this was only the first crack in something already rotten. My alarm went off and Megan was already on her phone. Her thumbs moved fast, screen tilted slightly away from me. She locked it as soon as I rolled toward her. Morning already, her voice came out too bright. My stomach clenched before my feet even hit the floor. In the kitchen, she moved around with this fake ease. She hummed some tune under her breath, way too upbeat. I watched her check her screen again between bites. Busy day, I tried to sound casual, not paranoid. Just emails and group chats, nothing interesting, she waved it off. I wanted to escape about last night and choked. The words stuck behind my teeth like they were glued there. Every version of that talk ended with me alone. So I asked about groceries instead and hated myself. Cowardice can look a lot like patience when you dress it up. When I grabbed my keys, she followed me to the door. Tyler was outside, tossing a basketball with his headphones on. Megan lifted a hand and he lifted his in return. He looked past her at me and gave a quick nod. I nodded back, pulse jumping way higher than a greeting deserved. As I walked to my car, I heard Megan call out. "You off today?" Her voice carried down the driveway. Tyler pulled one earbud down and smiled back at her. "Yeah, just hanging around for a bit, maybe later though." I got in my car before I heard the rest. On the commute, I tried to gaslight myself on purpose. I told myself married people get weird sometimes without cheating. I told myself neighbors can be close without any lines crossed. Every excuse sounded thinner each time I repeated it. By the time I parked, my head buzzed like an engine. Work did not slow my brain at all that morning. I clicked through emails without absorbing a single sentence. A notification popped up from our phone carrier about usage. For once, I was grateful for something that boring. I opened it just to stare at anything that was not my life. There was a link to detailed activity, so I clicked. The table came up with rows of numbers and timestamps. One number filled the page over and over and over. Short calls in the afternoon, long ones late at night. Almost every day for the last few weeks. At first I told myself it was spam or some service. Then I noticed the last 4 digits and my chest tightened. I knew that set of numbers from quick neighbor texts. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through messages. There it was at the top of my Tyler thread. For a minute I just stared at the two screens. My lunch break ticked away while I sat frozen. I counted how many calls came after midnight without stopping. Too many for any normal neighbor, even with an emergency. My heartbeat pounded so loud I thought someone might notice. I printed the recent activity and watched the pages slide out. My hands shook enough to smudge the ink at the corners. None of these calls were from my phone line, only hers. I folded the sheets and slipped them into my bag. That was the first time I let myself think the word grooming. Even then, I tried to downplay what I was seeing. He is younger, she helps people, that is her thing. Maybe he was going through something and reached out. Maybe she filled in as a mentor and kept me out. I clung to that story like a life raft with holes in it. On the drive home, I rehearsed questions in my head. Hey, random thought, how often do you talk to Tyler? Do you two stay up late on the phone together? Every version I came up with sounded like an accusation. I pulled into the driveway with nothing solid ready. Tyler's house was quiet when I stepped out of the car. No ball bouncing this time, no music, just stillness. Our bedroom window reflected my face as I walked in. I slipped the folded pages into the back of my dresser drawer. I told myself I would bring it up after I watched her tonight. Megan was on the couch with her tablet when I came in. She locked it with a quick tap as soon as she saw me. "How was your day?" she asked as she stretched her legs. I told her it was fine and watched her reach for her phone. The carrier app still sat open in my pocket like a loaded gun. Megan slid her old laptop in front of me and pushed it closer. "Can you wipe everything? I want to donate it." The request sounded ordinary, but my nerves jumped anyway. I told her sure and tried to keep my voice steady so she would not hear it. She walked away before I even opened the lid. I watched her leave the room and waited a second. Part of me hoped the battery was dead already. No such luck, the screen lit up right away. I plugged in the charger and opened the file manager. I always copy things off first in case someone panics later. Back then I told myself it was about helping her. Now I know I was stalling because I already sensed trouble. The folder list popped up and her username sat at the top. I clicked through out of habit until a name froze me. One directory had his first name and a school year after it. My thumb hovered over the trackpad while my pulse hammered. I backed out fast like I had touched something hot. Then I went right back in because curiosity beat loyalty. If this was innocent, she would forgive me for looking. If it was not innocent, I needed to stop playing dumb. I double-clicked his folder and watched another set of names appear. They were organized by seasons and school events like some private archive. The first batch held group photos from a backyard party. He stood in the background then, shorter than everyone and nervous. I scrolled down, and the images shifted as the years moved. He got taller and his face changed while her position changed more. She drifted closer in each new shot until they were side by side. There were whole sets where no one else appeared, just them together. This was not tutoring pictures anymore, and I felt my throat tighten. I opened a video file and watched him step into the frame. Megan laughed at something he said and touched his arm lightly. It looked exactly like a couple still figuring out if they were allowed. I stopped the video and opened the documents section, searching for anything written. There was a folder labeled Chat Exports, which I had never noticed. My thumb shook while I dragged it onto the desktop. If you are yelling at your screen right now, trust me, I get it. I opened the earliest log and watched a wall of messages load. The first lines were about homework and some test he had blown. She encouraged him and told him he was smarter than his grades. It sounded normal on the surface, like any adult boosting a teenager. As I scrolled, the tone changed, even though the words stayed polite. She started asking about his feelings and his parents and his friends. He began telling her things you only share with someone you trust. Then she shifted to talking about how mature he was for his age. Sitting there reading it, I felt my skin crawl even now. Back then I tried to pretend it was still innocent, just strange mentoring. Looking at it today, the pattern screams grooming from line 1. And yeah, I know I should have closed the file and called a lawyer. Farther into the logs, she started talking about how lonely she felt at home. He told her she deserved someone who noticed her and appreciated her. She replied that he did notice her and that it meant everything. My vision went fuzzy for a second and I had to breathe slow. I forced myself to focus on the timestamp at the top. The date lined up with his junior year and that wrecked me. Whatever excuse I had built about this being recent fell apart instantly. She had been working on him for years while I watched sports. The final logs jumped to the past few months and got worse. They started talking about missing each other and wishing they could be honest. She used hearts and pet names and little inside jokes I did not understand. He told her he loved her and she answered with 3 messages in a row. I slammed the laptop closed so hard the table rattled under it. For a second I just listened to my own breathing and nothing else. I almost shut everything down and pretended I had never looked. If you think I should have marched out right, then you are not wrong. Instead, I opened it again and dragged the worst logs into a new folder. I knew I might need proof because no one takes a husband at his word. Giving myself a task kept me from falling apart on that chair. I copied the folder onto a drive with hands that would not stop trembling. Right as the transfer finished, Megan walked back in, drying her hands. "Done already?" she asked while she glanced toward the screen. "Almost," I muttered and shifted my body so she could not see. "We can take it to the donation place tomorrow." She stretched and yawned. I told her I still had to run a cleaner and she nodded and left again. When the door closed, I stared at the desktop where that new folder sat. I knew my life had just split into before and after right there. And the worst part is I still had no clue what I would actually do with it. I set the laptop in the center of the table. The chat window glowed on the screen, waiting like a trap. "Megan, can you come in here for a second?" My hand stayed on the edge so she could not close it. I already knew this was the point where everything shifted. She walked in, wiping her fingers on a towel from the sink. "What now?" she asked, although she could already see the messages. I turned the screen so the lines faced her and waited. Her jaw stopped moving like someone had hit pause on her whole face. That tiny freeze told me more than any apology ever would. "This is out of context." She reached for the lid quickly. I blocked her hand with my wrist harder than I meant. "You wrote he was the only one who understood you." My voice shook. She pulled back and crossed her arms like I was a child. "You snooped again." Her eyes stayed on the keyboard, not on me. Calling it snooping felt easier for her than calling it evidence. I scrolled a little with one finger so the hearts showed. "He is your neighbor's son." I forced each word out slowly. "You wrote you wish you could wake up next to him." It burned. She flinched at that line like I had actually slapped her across the mouth. It was emotional, her voice dropped into this controlled therapist tone. He was struggling, I tried to be there for him, she breathed shallow. I stared at the screen where she called him perfect and addictive. You used that kid as your diary, my words came out low. She stepped back. Kay, once like the room had shrunk around us. Do you even hear yourself? She laughed without any humor at all. You ignore me for years and now you play investigator, her lip curled. I hate that part because there is a slice of truth there. For a moment guilt smothered the anger until I forced it aside. Even if I failed her, that never gave her the right to target him. He is not a little boy, her arms tightened across her chest. He is an adult now, he can decide who to love, she leaned forward. I felt my fingernails dig into my palm while she said that. You started when he was 16, I tapped the date on the log. She followed my finger and her face went completely blank for a second. A car door slammed outside and both of us turned toward the front. My brain filled in the rest before the knock even landed. You texted him, the words left my mouth before I could think. She did not answer, her expression already rearranging itself into something calm. That switch scared me more than any shouting ever could. Tyler stepped inside when she opened the door without even asking who it was. He froze when he saw the laptop on the table and my eyes on him. What is happening? His voice wobbled once before he forced it steady. Megan moved to his side so fast it almost looked rehearsed. Seeing them stand shoulder to shoulder in my kitchen knocked the air out of me. You should leave, I pointed toward the doorway without taking my eyes off him. He did not move, his hand brushed against her back instead. No, Megan said it like a full stop, not an option. You dragged him into this, I could hear my own voice climbing. Tyler stepped slightly in front of her like he could shield her from me. You groomed him, the word felt heavy but finally accurate in my mouth. You took a teenager who trusted you and you twisted that trust. His face flushed and he shook his head hard. Stop talking about me like I am some victim, he balled his fists. Megan touched his arm and looked at me like I had crossed an unforgivable line. He is an adult and I love him, her words landed one by one. You can call it whatever makes you feel righteous, I know what this is. I realized she had not used the word husband once since this started. What this is will interest the police and his parents, my hands still shook. Her whole body tensed at that, and his eyes flicked between us like a trapped animal. Do not do this to him, her voice dropped low and urgent. He has a future, you will destroy everything he worked for. She talked about his future like ours had already expired and it stung. You already destroyed something, I tapped my ring against the table for emphasis. She looked at the ring once then stared past me toward the hallway. That was when I noticed the duffel resting by the front door. It sagged in that way bags do when already stuffed full. You packed, my throat tightened again but this time with cold understanding. How long have you been planning to walk out with him? She did not deny it, which somehow hurt worse than hearing a lie. She moved toward the door and Tyler grabbed the bag without being asked. If you call anyone we will tell them you grew violent, her tone stayed icy. That threat pinned me in place more effectively than any shove. I imagined officers dragging me out while they played the frightened couple. I stepped back from the doorway and hated myself for that retreat. She opened the door and the evening air rushed in sharp and cool. Tyler carried the bag past me without meeting my eyes this time. Megan paused long enough to look around the house once like a final inventory. You can send my stuff to my parents, she reached for the railing. Then they walked down the steps together and I stayed frozen in the doorway. The door finally shut and the silence in the house roared back. My hands found the laptop again and I opened the same log. This time I did not look for new lines or fresh betrayals. I copied everything to another drive and emailed the files to myself. I knew the marriage was gone, but I would at least not lose my mind alone. The banging on the door dragged me off the couch. I had fallen asleep in my clothes sometime after she left. By the time I reached the hallway, the knocking turned frantic. When I opened it, his mother stood there shaking, his father right behind. I knew exactly why they were there before anyone spoke. Where are they? Her voice came out raw, not polite anymore. For a split second I almost claimed ignorance, played dumb neighbor who heard nothing. Instead I stepped aside and motioned them in because the lie already felt pointless. We ended up at the table again, 3 people circling an invisible bomb. I pulled the laptop around and brought up one of the shorter logs. Not the worst one, just enough that they could not call it innocent. His mother leaned over my shoulder and started reading aloud, then stopped halfway through a line about missing his hands. She jerked back like the text burned, one hand flying to her mouth. His father snatched the computer and scrolled further while his jaw clenched. "What is this?" his dad asked without looking up from the screen. My mouth felt full of sand, but I forced the words out. "They have been involved for years, since your kid was still in high school." His head snapped toward me, then back to the messages, like he was checking if I was exaggerating. I wished I was, more than anything I have ever wished before. "I am calling the police right now," he said as he reached for his phone. His wife caught his wrist and shook her head with this panicked look. "Please wait," she whispered to him, "he will be ruined for life." That sentence hit me as hard as everything else, because I had been thinking the same twisted thing. We all stood there waiting for someone to break first, nobody wanting to own the next move. "Let me show this to an attorney before you report anything." My voice finally came out firm, like I had rehearsed that line somewhere. "If there is a case, we will know exactly how to handle it. If there is not, at least we will not blow up his life for nothing." Saying that last part felt disgusting, but nobody argued with it. "You have one day," his dad pointed at the laptop like it was evidence at trial. "Then I do what I have to do, I do not care who gets hurt." I nodded and printed copies while they waited, the machine louder than usual in that quiet house. When they left, his mother hugged me too tightly and begged me to fix it somehow. I watched them walk next door and wondered if anything was fixable at all. The attorney fit me in that afternoon after I emailed a few screenshots. In the conference room, I laid printed pages in a neat stack, my hands refusing to stay still. He read for a long minute without talking, flipping back and forth between dates. Eventually, he leaned back and looked at me like a mechanic staring at a wrecked engine. "You have something real here, but it is not simple at all." He explained that the messages from high school showed a pattern, especially the romantic language. "The problem is he is legally grown now, and any recent contact will be argued as mutual. We can report the older conduct and see if authorities care enough to move. Or we can send everything to his university and his licensing boards later and let them decide." It all sounded cold and strategic, not at all like the moral victory I had pictured. "What would you do if this were your son?" I asked before I could stop myself. He stared at the desk for a beat, then told me he would probably still go to the police. "But as your lawyer, I have to tell you, it might not end how you hope. She could claim he pursued her once he turned 18, and that you are just jealous and trying to punish them." I walked out of that office with a folder of options and zero certainty. That night her parents called, their number flashing across my screen like an alarm. I almost let it ring out, then I hit accept because running never works for long. They had already spoken to her, they knew she was with him somewhere safe. "Please do not drag this into court," her mother pleaded, you know she was unhappy for years. Hearing my failures used as a shield for what she did made something break loose inside me. "She targeted a kid who trusted her," I said, "this is not just some affair." There was a long pause on the line before her father spoke in this stiff, careful way. "If you press charges, she will lose her job, and so will he. Do you really want that?" I wanted to shout yes and no together. Instead, I told him silence would not erase what happened. I hung up before they could try another guilt trip and sat there shaking with the phone still in my hand. A week later, I sat across from a therapist because functioning on rage and coffee stopped working. I gave her the fast version, just the laptop and the departure and the neighbors. She listened without interrupting, then asked who I thought I was most angry at. My first answer was Megan, my second answer was myself, my third one was that I did not know anymore. She nodded and said what happened to that boy was abuse, whether anyone ever took it to court or not. Hearing someone call it abuse out loud rearranged the whole story in my brain. Up until then, I kept framing it as cheating plus something vague and ugly on the side. Now every message where she praised his maturity felt like a step in a plan, not some flirty joke. I left that session without a solution, but at least the fog around what she had done finally started to thin. A few days after that, I saw them again by accident at a gas station off the highway. They were in her car, his hand on the wheel, her head tipped back laughing at something. She noticed me first and her smile froze, then she turned away like I was a stranger asking for directions. I almost walked over and told him everything. Instead, I paid and drove home. With my jaw locked. Later that week, his parents and I met again, this time at their dining room table. We signed statements and packed the printed copies into a large envelope for the detective unit. No one cheered or hugged when it was sealed, we just sat there listening to the clock tick. All I could think was that whatever came next would hurt, the damage already locked in long ago. Tonight I am back at my own table staring at the screen and the blinking cursor. Part of me still misses her laugh and the routine we built, even knowing what she was doing behind it. Another part wants every authority in the country to see those logs and never let her near a teenager again. So I am throwing this onto the internet for strangers, hoping someone tells me I am not insane. Would you have reported her or would you have let it go?